Good evening, welcome to my channel. Got another story for you today. Now this one isn't based upon 5 random words. It's another one of those ones that I wrote for the NY Midnight short story competition. This one did quite well, but I've tweaked it a little bit since then. I cannot remember the criteria that were involved. I think there was something to do with no, I can't remember. I honestly can't remember what the genesis was, but they did give you a setting, a character, and something else, and a genre, I think. I think crime might have been the genre, but I don't remember exactly. But it doesn't really matter. The main thing is, I've got another story for you, and I believe this is number 124, and it's called Encounter at Beachy Head. Robert Brass stood on the edge of the chalk cliffs at Beachy Head, contemplating his fate. Could be worse, he thought, scratching his stubble. He was 58, twice divorced, overweight, broke, friendless, directionless, and living under a potential death sentence. But at least he had his health. He swayed a little, as if tempting fate, feeling the sea breeze lift off the Atlantic as seagulls wheeled overhead. Robert wasn't seriously contemplating suicide. That was the loser's way out, and Robert wasn't a loser. From some perspectives, Robert led a charmed life. Since he was 14, Robert had been a burglar, and an exceptional one. He had begun by casing wealthy homes in Glasgow and Edinburgh in the guise of a Boy Scout doing charitable chores. He'd find out all he could about a property, how well protected, who lived there, and crucially, what valuables they owned, then report back to his uncle's gang. Eventually, Robert graduated to art theft. He'd been mercilessly teased at school for his love of the post-impressionists, or as one friend had put it, them skinny women with no ease, referring to his favourite artist, Modigliani. Robert leveraged his love of modern art into a lucrative sideline. He rarely did the actual thieving himself. Instead, he'd concentrate on recceing and planning, then pass on the information to local lags for a tasty commission. Robert knew the art world intimately. He developed a network of shady characters who'd fence what the gang stole. He understood how to disable most security systems and had adopted modern technologies, including drone surveillance and hacking. You didn't cut power lines these days, especially as severing the wrong cable could alert the cops or ragdoll you across the street. Instead, you disabled your victim's router and phone lines so their alarm, if triggered, couldn't alert the police. You used a drone to spray paint the CCTV dimples, disabled alarms with liquid nitrogen, then let yourself in, pulling up in a van marked clear as day glaziers, and getting to work with a glass cutter. Nobody questions men in high-vis tabards and hard hats. Robert was largely untroubled by the immorality of his life's work. Mostly the insurance companies paid out, so the owners weren't out of pocket. Anyhow, most art collectors were complete arseholes, with high-class mistresses, tax havens in the Caymans, and obnoxious, badly painted family portraits proudly displayed between their Chrysophiles and Damien Hirsts. Or so Robert imagined, since he rarely saw the interior of their homes. It had all been going swimmingly until a straightforward job went horribly wrong. Robert was working with a new gang, one who'd already pulled off 2 jobs in Edinburgh's new town, when Robert's musings were suddenly interrupted by an angular presence at the periphery of his vision. A young man, thin as a rake, wearing an ill-fitting tracksuit, was eyeing him. Trying to figure out if I'm suicidal, thought Robert, or about to tap me for cash. Why does he look so familiar? Do I know you? The newcomer said, looking baffled and insistent at the same time. You seem familiar, likes. Robert shook his head and turned away. Scottish accent? This had better be just a coincidence. His thoughts drifted back to the robbery that had led him here. Robert had provided everything: floor plans, security specs from the dark web, the location of the safe containing unframed Hogarth prints, plus its combination. Amazing what you can do with a drone equipped with a 150mm lens. Except the elderly couple had delayed their holiday departure by 1 day. A less impetuous crew than the Margiottas would have backed off, but Tony was notoriously impatient. He tied up the couple, then failed to open the safe because it later transpired dyslexic brother Freddie had transcribed 2 digits. Angry and afraid, the Margiottas resorted to threats, causing the old man to suffer a heart attack. His wife wouldn't stop screaming until they knocked her unconscious. That was the final straw. Robert couldn't abide unnecessary violence and considered the Marjottas unprofessional thugs. He tried to extricate himself, but Tony made him an offer it would be foolhardy to refuse, assuming he valued his testicles. Detective Sanchita Shah recognised Robert's MO and piled pressure on him to sell out the gang. He caved and cooperated, giving her everything she needed, his entire network from the Marjottas to the international fences and crooked dealers. In return, Robert got immunity, a new identity, and a seaside cottage in Eastbourne. He'd never been to the Kent coast, but given the Marjottas would do anything to get revenge, Robert had little choice. He'd been staring at the sea for some minutes. When he turned to look about him, the strange young man was hobbling back towards the car park. False alarm, thought Robert, releasing a pent-up breath. In his new life, he was a landscape painter called Robert Brass. He was born Kenneth Simpson, widower and enjoyer of morning walks along the cliff tops, followed by lunch in the Beachy Head pub. Bob Brass. He'd chosen the name himself. D.I. Shah had rolled her eyes when he suggested it. He headed to the pub, as per his routine, ordered their steak and ale pie and a pint of trout tickler. Halfway through lunch, Robert idly glanced around the lounge. He kept mainly to himself since relocating, intending to make no friends or acquaintances until all the Marjottas were safely behind bars. Still, in a small town, you stuck out if you were too standoffish, so Robert had got to know a couple of pub regulars, the red-nosed gentleman farmer Dave McTaggart and his lady friend Melissa Kinnerton. Robert caught Dave and Mel's eyes as they sauntered over with their pints. "Bobby, tearing into the old Aiken stale, are we?" said Dave, slopping his pint down on Robert's table. McTaggart was under the mistaken impression that he was some species of wit. "Slow down, love," added Melissa, wearing a Guinness moustache that failed to complement her own. "You eat like a man possessed." It was true. Robert was panic-eating, trying to calculate the minimum length of time he could spend in their company without seeming suspiciously rude. "Oh, just hungry," he muttered. "Took a long walk to find a view to paint tomorrow." Robert's eyes drifted towards the door in an inopportune moment. There was the strange young man he'd encountered at the cliff's edge. Like a bewildered puppy, the lad tilted his head as if trying to comprehend something. "Please don't come over," thought Robert, gulping ale and turning away. To no avail. The lad bounced over like Tigger on steroids. "I do know you for somewhere. Gonna figure it out if it kills me." Robert laughed for the benefit of his companions. "I'm a balding 50-something bloke. We all look the same. You're mistaken." The young man shook his head, wound tight like he was trying to wring the truth out of himself. He absolutely must not remember, thought Robert. "Maybe you knew one another back in Jockland," offered Dave with all the finesse of Boris Johnson, attempting a coherent thought. "Are you Scottish then?" said Melissa. "No, I am not," Robert professed. "Scouse, actually. Guy's mistaken. I'm sure his friends are waiting, so maybe he can figure it out elsewhere." The young man frowned. Robert noticed he had a hand thrust out. "Nae friends. Nearly passing through. I drive trucks. Got one parked out back. Name's Danny M." M could stand for Marjotta, couldn't it? If Robert's cover were blown, he could call DC Shah and ask for relocation. It was a long shot, but it was better than being run repeatedly over by an articulated lorry. Although Danny didn't resemble an assassin, Robert had to act fast. "Help me out," Robert said, shaking Danny's hand with a firmness he hoped would be interpreted as a warning. "M stands for—" "Miller," said Danny, wincing at Robert's vice-like grip. "Well, Danny," said Robert, still smiling, "you'll be getting back to your vehicle." Dave gave a comic gasp. "Roberto, let the poor fellow join us. He's sleeping in a lorry. He defo knows you. You even got the same Scottish tan, pink with a hint of puce." Robert had to act fast. Danny, whom he'd twigged had been the driver on the second-to-last Marjotta job, was a blowhard, a blabbermouth. Robert was in real danger. "Danny, do you smoke?" he asked, casually as possible. "No, really," said Danny, wearing the expression of a man on the verge of a breakthrough. "I think you'll smoke what I've got in my pocket. Come on, join me outside." Robert stood up abruptly. Dave turned from planting a sloppy kiss on Mel's lipstick-smeared lips. "Wait for us, Bob. We'll have a puff or two of the old wacky-backy, won't we, love?" Melissa nodded from deep in her pint glass. "Sorry, guys, would you mind my pie?" Robert asked plaintively. "I wouldn't want the waiters filching it." Dave frowned, then burst into laughter. "All right, fatty. Roll one for us, will you?" Robert grabbed Danny's arm and hauled him out of his seat. He frog-marched the young man out into the chilly afternoon air. "Didn't he really smoke weed?" protested Danny. "Got any eckies?" "Come on," said Robert. "You and I going for a wee stroll." His faux English accent had fallen away, but Robert didn't care. There was only one solution to his dilemma. He stormed up the footpath towards the precipice, Danny in tow. "I do know you," Danny suddenly expostulated, running in front of Robert, in so doing backing towards the cliff edge. He's going to do my work for me, thought Robert. "I don't think you do, Danny." "Absolutely I do. For the job on Royal Circus, we nicked half a dozen Mongolians, remember?" Robert tried not to rise to it. He really did, for at least 20 seconds. Modigliani's, Danny. They were Modigliani's. Spreading shock filled Danny's eyes as he backed instinctively away, now perilously close to calamity. "It's me, Danny, Kenneth Simpson, and I'm just going to ask you one question. How quickly do you think you could reach the beach below?" Danny turned, looking along the coastline of vanilla-white chalk bluffs. "So there's maybe a path that zigzags?" "The answer's 4 seconds, Danny." Danny blinked, uncomprehending. Perfect recall, but no bloody brains, thought Robert. I really ought to give him a shove. "I'm threatening to kill you, Danny." Danny gulped convulsively like a landed fish. "Oh, that's right," Robert said in a mollifying tone. "Here's what you're going to do." Without returning to the pub, "Eject!" Danny began to protest. God, it was so tempting to see how well a Glaswegian could fly. "Without your coat, you're going to get back in your truck and fuck off back to Scotland. Then you're going to never ever speak of this day again. You didn't see me. You met nary a soul on your trip down south. Is that clear?" Danny nodded, swallowing. Then the scrawny youngster stumbled, half turned to reposition his left foot, and met only air. It was one of those moments where a microsecond's thought, or lack of it, could make all the difference. Allow a genuine accident to occur, and Robert's problem would solve itself. Danny was about to cartwheel to his death when something arrested his fall. Robert had grabbed Danny's t-shirt, acting on pure instinct and recognition. Danny was a stupid wee kid, but no more ignorant than Robert had been at his age. He didn't deserve to end up as fish food. "Fuck me," said Danny as Robert pulled him to safety. "I was a goner. You... "Don't make me think about it, son," said Robert, shaking his head. "Now, haven't you got important fucking off to attend to?" Danny nodded, hesitating as if expecting an embrace that wasn't coming. He turned to shuffle off towards his waiting truck. Robert knew he probably couldn't trust the loudmouth to keep his trap shut, but he'd bought himself some time to pack up his easel, the one Modigliani sketch he hadn't fenced, and his regrets. Once more, he'd be moving on. There were some amazingly scenic views on the Cornish coast, weren't there? So that was fun to write, fun to imagine, harder to perform. I'm not great at accents, even Glaswegian ones, which is absurd, really. But anyway, it was fun, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And I'll be back with a random word story very soon, and possibly another little how-to video if I can think of a topic that hasn't been covered yet. If you have any suggestions, please leave them below in comments, and like and subscribe and do all those lovely things so that I know you're out there. And I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.